Who do we say Jesus is? What's denying ourselves and taking up our cross? Do we have leadership squabbles? What's our attitude towards outsiders? Are we fit for service in the kingdom of God? Let's look at Luke 9. What was one of the earliest mission trips like? Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. He sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And he said to them, "Take nothing for the journey, neither staffs, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and don't have 2 tunics apiece. Whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And whoever will not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet as a testimony against them." So they departed and went through the towns, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Why was Herod confused about who Jesus was? When Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, heard about everything Jesus was doing, he was puzzled. Some were saying that John the Baptist had been raised from the dead. Others thought Jesus was Elijah or one of the other prophets risen from the dead. "I beheaded John," Herod said, "so who's this man about whom I hear such stories?" And he kept trying to see him. Where did Jesus next take the apostles, and what challenge did he have for them? The apostles, when they had returned, told him what things they'd done. He took them and withdrew apart to a desert region of a city called Bethsaida. But the multitudes, perceiving it, followed him. He welcomed them, spoke to them of God's kingdom, and he cured those who needed healing. The day began to wear away, and the 12 came and said to him, "Send the multitude away, that they may go into the surrounding villages and farms, and lodge and get food, for we're here in a deserted place." How did Jesus feed 5,000 men and their families? When the day was almost over, the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowd away, so that they can go to the nearby villages and countryside to find lodging and food, because we're in a deserted place." He replied, "You give them something to eat." But they said, "We have no more than 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all these people." They said this because about 5,000 men were present. Jesus said to his disciples, "Seat them in groups of about 50. They did so, and everyone was seated. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven, blessed them and broke them, and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. Everyone ate until they were full, and the disciples filled 12 baskets with the leftovers. Do people still wonder who Jesus is? Who do we say he is? When Jesus was alone praying, his disciples came to him, and he asked them, "What do people say about me?" They answered, "Some say you're John the Baptist, or Elijah, or a prophet from long ago, who's come back to life." Jesus then asked, "But who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You're the Messiah sent from God." Jesus strictly warned his disciples not to tell anyone about this. What does it mean to deny ourselves and take up our cross? What did Jesus mean that some would not die before seeing the kingdom of God? Saying the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. And he said to all, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever's ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God." Did a few of the apostles see the kingdom of God in the Transfiguration? About 8 days after these words, he took along Peter, John, and James, and went up on the mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah. They appeared in glory, and were speaking of his death which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter and those with him were in a deep sleep. And when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men who were standing with him. As the two men were departing from him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud appeared and overshadowed them. They became afraid as they entered the cloud. Then a voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my Son, the chosen one. Listen to him." After the voice had spoken, only Jesus was found. They kept silent, and in those days told no one what they'd seen. What did Jesus talk about an unbelieving generation while healing a boy? The next day, when they'd come down from the mountain, a large crowd met Jesus. Suddenly a man in the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, because he's my only living child. Without warning, a spirit takes control of him, and he suddenly screams, going into convulsions, and foams at the mouth. The spirit mauls him and refuses to leave him. I begged your disciples to drive him out, but they couldn't." Jesus answered, "You unbelieving and perverted generation, how much longer must I be with you and put up with you? Bring your son here." Even while the boy was coming, the demon knocked him to the ground and threw him into convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. Why did the disciples not understand what Jesus was saying about his death? And they were all amazed at the mighty power of God. But while they wondered every one at all things which Jesus did, he said to his disciples, "Let these sayings sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man shall be delivered into the hands of men." But they didn't understand this saying, and it was hid from them that they didn't perceive it, and they feared to ask him of that saying. Do we still have struggles in our local churches over leadership? Now an argument started among them as to which of them might be the greatest. But Jesus, knowing what they were thinking in their heart, took a child and stood him by his side, and said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For the one who's least among all of you, this is the one who's great." And John answered and said, "Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to hinder him, because he doesn't follow along with us." But Jesus said to him, "Don't hinder him, for he who is not against you is for you." What kind of attitude do we have towards those who don't welcome us as Christians? When the days were approaching for his ascension, he was determined to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers on ahead of him, and they went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make arrangements for him, and they didn't receive him, because he was traveling toward Jerusalem. When his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. What is the cost of following Jesus? Are we fit for service in the kingdom of God? And they were walking along the road. A man said to him, "I'll follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens, and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." He said to another man, "Follow me." But he replied, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Still another said, "I'll follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family." Jesus replied, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God." Who do we say Jesus is? What is denying ourselves and taking up our cross? Do we have leadership squabbles? What's our attitude towards outsiders? Are we fit for service in the kingdom of God? You decide.